Greetings, brothers and sisters. So, I have some, like, what I consider profound new information about what's going on with the collapse in the system and all these things. And so I want to get to that. I want to get through the headlines first because they feed into it. Oftentimes I'll have like a good meditation and some ideas will come to me. And then I'll look at the headlines and they'll completely support, or there'll be stories in the news that completely support this, I don't know, revelation that I've had. And so I want to get to that in just a moment, but let me get through these headlines first. QAnon's new plan, run for school board. In the wake of Donald Trump's 2020 election defeat, many QAnon followers have hatched a new plan to run for school board or local office, spreading the gospel of Q, but they don't call it QAnon. See, what they've said, the original headline, like the clickbait headline on the front page of MSNBC, they acknowledge that QAnon doesn't really exist anymore. Q hasn't posted in 6 months, but some QAnon followers still keep the faith. But in reality, the Q stuff is basically gone. Like we see it here. It's just, they've gone into hiding or whatever, therapy. I mean, just dealing with them here in the truth community. And I've said it before, us dealing with them has been harder on us than it is for these people in the mainstream media. It's a win for them, right? The craziness of QAnon and the ridiculousness of it has been something that is great for the media and Joe Biden and this whole agenda. It's something they want. They want crazy from the so-called truth community. They want to look at all of us as crazy conspiracy theorists. And so QAnon has given them that, right? And they won't acknowledge that it is just a fringe part of a movement of people who want alternative narratives than the one they're getting from the news media. The mainstream news media sucks, and now that there is something else, an alternative, where people have the ability to express opinions and share information on the internet on a more, national and global level, instead of, like, you could always talk to your friends or, meet people and have conversations, but now that's been amplified by the internet, where people who have knowledge and insight can share that without having to go and get a job on NBC News or the New York Times or whatever it is. And it's the same thing for independent rappers, independent musicians, independent whatever it might be, right? Independent, any sort of expression. You can show your craft and your knowledge and your skill on the internet now, and or even self-publishing books and things like this. All of those things you can do without having to go through one of these handling mega corporations that is going to edit you and suppress your, whatever it is, right? Your ability to express yourself. And so since that's happened, the mainstream stuff isn't getting the same love and the same, the same support and viewership that it used to get. And so instead of saying, all right, this is, we suck, like the mainstream media saying we suck and people don't want to listen to us anymore, and change and compete, right? Change and become human beings and express themselves, become authentic and express themselves in the same way. They're attacking individual people, independent people, and they need crazy. They need stuff like QAnon to demonize this idea that individual people, without handlers, without some sort of corporate entity behind them, can go out and create content that, is better than what they're producing. So QAnon is great for them. They love it. That's why they keep on talking about it, But they don't have to deal with, like we have the difficulty of dealing with QBs and how the QBs have affected our lives here, right? People like me and the rest of us, because of the crazy stuff that they've put out there. And they're just, they're QBs.
Picking up some new momentum, its followers are running for school boards and local offices, spreading the gospel of Q, but not calling it QAnon, according to NBC News senior reporter Ben Collins. Ben joins me now. Ben, this next fascinating chapter of QAnon, tell us about this new plan. How are they spreading the Q, if you will, without calling it QAnon?
Yeah, so supporters of QAnon.
See, that's a great expression on her face. So, they're saying spreading it. Now, if people are dumb enough to fall for Q, this is like my policy. This is what separates me from a lot of other people in whatever it is, like just in general, who are putting out this kind of content. That I understand that human beings have the freedom of choice. And I don't, let that affect me. Like, I don't, their choices don't affect me in what I do here. Like, I put out information about what needs to happen, what's happening now, and what needs to happen in the future in terms of a spiritual movement, a deepening of people's internalized connection to God. That is what I consider the lone solution to what's going on now. That we have people who are, all of us, who have been materialized. We've lost our connection with divinity. And not only does that have to be reestablished, but it has to be something that's even deeper than it was ever before. That it has to be where we reach a whole new level of our connection to God. This is the heartfulness meditation that I do. But I fully accept if people don't want to hear that or don't want to do it. You understand this, that, the controllers have to control you and force their opinion on you. But we live in a world where people have freedom of choice. And that is always going to be the X factor. And if these QAnon people go for local school boards and they're putting their stuff out here like this, girl's saying, and people accept it because they're angry or they're reacting to Joe Biden or whatever, they're freaked out by changes and they just don't have the ability to see QBs and the Q movement for what it is, then that's going to happen. Like, it's just, just let it happen. That's why I say that all the time. Like, people are going to have to make a choice. And the people who control the system, the people who run the system want to control that choice. That's why I call them controllers. They are always trying to control and manipulate people into making the choices that they want them to make. And that's something I have to, come back to and get to more in the end of this thing.
Yeah, so supporters of QAnon have realized that the branding is toxic, that it's just not going to work if you go into a school board meeting, you say, hey, I'm a QAnon follower and here's what we believe. And by the way, the kids should be taught like this. Instead, they sort of dispense of the QAnon name, keep the ideology, and sort of push those talking points.
So you have what people are saying, QBs are rebranding themselves. And this is something where, yeah, but QBs who aren't known for their strong ability for self-perception have realized that they kind of lost this, some of them, lost this battle. And Q has, disappeared and was never real. That's the problem with it. You followed a leader who wasn't what the leader said he was. And he was just the opposite. And also with Trump, and I'll get back to this in just a moment. But you have, like, him admitting that even QBs realized that they're done and that their brand is toxic. And, the movement is no longer going to grow. Like, it's, it reached this high point. Anger towards Joe Biden and things like that, that's going to take different forms in the Republican Party. The censorship, the deplatforming and things like that, that's going to take, there's going to be reactions to that. But it's no longer going to be in the form of the Q movement. The Q movement has failed. Like, everyone kind of knows it. If they don't know it, it's like, somebody living in some cave still fighting World War II, some deserted island or whatever it is, or, some other war. It's something in the past, right? But they're keeping it alive here. And there's reasons for that, and I'll come back to that later. So then on to this. Naomi Osaki says she recharged and ready to return for Tokyo Olympics. Osaka explained her decision to make a mental health break and leave the French Open in New Time magazine essay. And here it is, it's okay to not be okay. And this is a saying, I've covered before. It's okay to not be okay. This is the celebration of the broken. And this is her Netflix trailer here.
No one really knows all the sacrifices that you make just to be good.
Listen to the music they're playing. It's like a horror movie. They're manipulating. Music manipulates the audience into feeling about something. So this could be positive or light, but also the tone of her voice, she sounds like she's, about to cry or whatever. And they're making it sound like it's horrific what she's choosing to go through. She could just quit. Like, she doesn't have to do this, right? Like, this is a choice. This isn't something, these are things that people consider privileges, or people are competing to have this position, being one of the best women's tennis players in the world and making millions of dollars and being famous. And it's like, if you don't like it, if it sucks, you can always quit. You don't have to do it. It's not a Stephen King novel. You can walk away anytime you want, right? It's not, you're being chased by Michael Myers. It's your choice to be there. Get out, right? You can get out.
No one really knows all the sacrifices that you make just to be good. Before I won US Open,
I don't have a problem with her not showing up for the French Open because she was depressed. I don't have, obviously I don't. And I don't have a problem with somebody who quits something like this. Whatever it might be. Something of a high level, elite level type of athletics, or being at the top of your acting career. You quit Hollywood, you quit politics, you quit business, you're a CEO or something like this. That's everyone's personal choice, right? That, you don't owe me an explanation. Like, I don't care, right? Whatever. I wouldn't do any of these things myself. Like, I couldn't make it. I couldn't do what they do. Like, in terms of, I couldn't put in the work and the effort. Like, I tried for basketball. Like, some days I was into it and some days I wasn't. But I definitely couldn't tolerate all the other BS and the control, because you're, almost in like a prison when you're in one of these jobs. You're under the microscope. I just couldn't do it. So I'm, if they want to quit, it's probably a wise thing. You're getting out of a trap.
so many people told my dad that I would never be anything.
Naomi, she was like an overnight superstar. And I think that pressure weighed heavily on her.
I think the amount.
It's just that, these things are really tough. There's a lot of pressure and competition and whatever it might be, right? Let's go to the end of this thing.
So, like, what am I if I'm not a good tennis player?
And so it is the indulgence in how tough it is for these elite and privileged people that we're hearing more and more from Hollywood, from, like, I just talked about this. I covered this with Matthew Perry from Friends, who felt depressed and, broken if the studio audience didn't laugh at his jokes on Friends. All these people saying they felt enormous pressure. Of course you did, because that's what it takes to be at the top of something in the American beastly system. You want this. You want to be elite. You want to be, a privileged person. You want to make the money. You want the fame. You want all these things. You want to be known as a great tennis player. And if that sucks, if you realize it sucks, which I've said over and over again, your coping mechanism shouldn't be, I get to be broken and be a part of this thing, right? I get to be mentally ill and part of this thing. It's mentally ill. There's a mental illness behind this type of success. There's a level of obsession, like the amount of work that you have to put in to be elite at one thing, to be great at one thing, specialize in one thing, in this case, tennis. But anything in terms of athletics, or if you want to rise up to high levels in Hollywood or politics, you have to neglect the other parts of your life, the other parts of your human psyche. You have to neglect your spiritual wing, all these things. You have to put everything into the achievement of something that you'll be considered great for. And so you're going to be underdeveloped in all the other areas of your life, your relationships, all these things are going to suffer because you want to be great at something. And when you become great at that thing and people recognize you and say, oh, wow, you're great. And you're like, oh, I don't feel great because you're out of balance. And I want to talk about this more later. And so the out of balance, when you realize that, then it is probably time to quit. When you realize what you've given up and how you are like underdeveloped and you don't feel good, it doesn't even feel good. The fame and the fortune and all these things doesn't feel good. It's one of my primary messages on this channel, the so-called American dream. When people rise up to be successful and they put so much effort into being successful, in this way, especially for the people who are, famous, rich, whatever, iconic, they're not happy. Like their souls aren't like, yeah, this is great. They didn't achieve something, their primary soul's purpose. And so their soul says, all right, now we can, try something new. All right, you tried this. It wasn't great. You became an emperor. You became a king. You became a queen. You became a, great tennis player. You became the president. You became this. And now, like, that that's not why you're here. Like that, you didn't get it done. Like, that's not why your soul chose to incarnate. You tried that, right? Now we have to try something else because there's a real purpose for you. There's a spiritual purpose. There's a soul's purpose. And so your soul and, the part of you that's connected to God and what God wants you to be are not aligning with your so-called greatness, your achievement. And so, whatever it might be, the fame and fortune if it isn't the purpose that you're here for. And so then you have it and you're like, oh, it sucks. It's not so great. It actually kind of, I feel bad, right? You're mentally affected. And so you have all these celebrities and people that, worked real hard for something and it doesn't, make them happy. And then they whine about, it's okay not to be okay. This is something that Demi Lovato said. Well, you should learn to be okay. Like the reason you're not okay is because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you're depressed, if you have any kind of psychological issues, if you're feeling, having trouble sleeping, if you're having issues, it's because you're not doing what your soul wants you to do. Like all these things. And also there's, our beastly system negatively affects people, not just the culture, but also like, the electromagnetic poisoning and all these things. So, I mean, that's part of it as well. But in terms of when you align and you find your soul's path and you do what you're supposed to do, it makes you feel better on levels that most people can't understand because they're not doing that. I'll come back to this. So I saw these two great headlines. My dad wouldn't stop apologizing for my childhood. Everything changed when he did. And this one, these are from Huffington Post. These are just op-ed writers, guest writers. My boyfriend dumped me on vacation, and it was the best trip ever. The best trip ever. Those titles are self-explanatory, but I want to get to the, main point of this video and to tie these things all together. Good leadership. When you are a good leader, there's two things that are important. There's success now. There is, getting what you want now or being successful in the moment. And then there's success in the future. There is lifestyle. There is, how this is going to affect humanity and the people you're leading, even the ones that aren't even born yet, in the sense of 2 or 3 generations out. So there is, when you're like a leader in any, capacity, whether you're a parent, you're a father or mother, you're, a leader of a company or a country or a spiritual organization, whatever it is, you're part of a group of leaders and you're, making decisions about people's well-being now, but also into the future. And so as a family, as a parent, you can take out credit cards and you can mortgage all of your possessions, your house and all these things. And you can even take credit cards out on your kids, right? And ruin their credit, quit your job, whatever, take everyone to Disney World and, whatever your kids want to do and have a great number of fun years until you're homeless and, The kids realize they have no future. They can't go to college. Their credit has already been ruined, and the whole family is in a hole. And so you can have momentary success, but mortgage your future to get it. And that's what has happened to all of us in terms of the debt-based economy. That's what has happened. That's our situation. That when they went with the debt-based economy, the people who, run the system, who ran the system years ago, I've talked about this. There was this decision that has affected all of us. And that was people who were short-sighted and wanted to be really wealthy themselves. Groups of people, individuals who knew about the usury system. And they knew what the outcome of the usury system, the debt-based economy is. I've talked about this over and over again. The usury system, the promise to pay system, where your money is debt. Your money is a IOU. And so this has been, fleshed out in so many of my videos and so many other people's videos and, talks about this. We have a usury system, and everybody knows how it ends. It grows quickly. It's a Ponzi scheme. It is a financial gimmick where there can be untold wealth because the wealth isn't real. It isn't something where, like, let's say your currency is gold. Well, you have to mine gold, and gold is finite and limited. You understand this? There's so much gold on planet Earth. Or your currency could be a commodity, some other commodity, salt or a crop, wheat or barley or corn or something, oil, and, I guess some fuel, whatever it is, a commodity. And that's something that's used as a currency system where you trade this commodity back and forth for other things that you need. And again, those commodities have to be mined or have to be created or grown or whatever it is. They have to be harvested, and they're finite and limited. But a debt-based economy, it's just imaginary. It's a promise. It's a series of IOUs that people create in all kinds of different financial schemes and things like this, the derivatives market. And now in the age of computers where it's all digital on top of it, which is, again, it just doesn't exist. It's in cyber reality. Value and wealth is in cyber reality. You can create trillions of dollars, quadrillions of dollars worth of debt and call it wealth and trade it back and forth and have this artificial opulence, but it's not real. Like, it is completely, made up, and it's demonic because it goes against the natural order of things. It goes against God's will, and it breaks multiple divine laws, right? And so it is something where the people that convinced our ancestors to leave the farm and specialize in some skill created a situation where at some point this was all going to collapse. The reality was going to set in, and debt would become debt and not wealth, and the system would collapse, and all the people who were dependent on the system now and only had specialized skills and had given up their connection to God, their families are destroyed, and their agrarian skills, how to be a natural human being who knew how to function and grow food and make clothes, and all the primary skills had been lost. We're going to be up shit's creek, right? We're going to be in trouble. Like, we're all in that situation that somebody was, there was these games that I played when I was a kid. It was called Wonder Ball, and you sat in a circle and passed the ball around the circle, and you sang this song, and at the end of the song, whoever was holding the Wonder Ball was out, right? And so we're the generation holding the Wonder Ball. It's not a Wonder Ball. It was just thunder. I don't know. Both my puppies jump. I don't know if the microphone caught it. We have a thunderstorm today, which is very auspicious. And so the Wonder Ball, it would be, so whoever got caught with the Wonder Ball was out. And we're the generation or the next generation, this whatever period of time, it's the end of this system. And it's a short-sighted system. And the people who ran the system, who created this, just wanted, there's just thunder going on. I know that you might be able to hear it in the background. Lightning, really, it's not thunder. Thunder and lightning are the same thing. Thunder's the sound, lightning is what you see. And we had a lightning strike near here. I've talked about this before in other videos, but one of the things that I didn't realize before, that is a few things, but the first one is this, that population growth was a good thing for the debt-based usury system. Because when you have money, which has no value, which is the government's promising to make good on the money. It's just backed by a promise, which is a form of debt, right? A promise is a debt, right? When you say, I promise to do this, you've created a debt, especially if there's an exchange. Or you give me this, I promise to do this. That's a debt. Now you owe something. And that's what our economy is based in. And so to turn these promises turn this debt into something real, you have to have people who are going to do work, right? So let's say you're some lord, or the queen has 6 billion acres around the world or something like this globally. Well, you can't work that land by yourself. To turn that land into food, or to harvest the resources, the minerals, the gold, the oil, whatever it is, right? You need machines now, but before that, you needed people. You needed slaves. You needed people to work the land, right? If you were going to be a plantation owner, you were going to be a person of wealth, you needed some sort of cheap labor. You needed, people. And even if you have machines, you need people to run the machines, right? And so the first reason they need people is to process and harvest wealth for them, right? Where they are making money off of the work of other people, where other people are doing the work, working their land and things. And this is, a lot of thunder going, a lot of lightning strikes around me. So the first reason for people, needing a population, needing more and more people, is to create and harvest resources. The second one is to create a market, to create a bigger market to sell goods and services to, which increases their ability for wealth. So the reason why there's billionaires and trillionaires and multimillionaires is because there's 8 billion people. There's this huge global market. And so these are, reasons why population growth has been encouraged by the people that run the system. But another component to this is that when you have unchecked and unfettered population growth, or any kind of growth, economic growth, eventually it's like something you build too tall and it falls over, right? There is going to be a collapse. There's going to be something on the other end of that. And so this is the problem with this system, because it just grows exponentially, the debt-based system. And we know this with the technological market and all this growth that's happened, that eventually there has to be a collapse, right? Things can't keep on growing forever. Populations can't keep on growing forever. Businesses can't keep on growing forever. There has to be dips in it. There has to be collapses. And they haven't allowed those things to happen. They just, fudge the numbers. And this is what everything we're dealing with now with the pandemic, all these different things. I've talked about that. There's been a sort of a reset, or a correction in 2001, and they covered it up with something else. There was one in 2008, which they said, all right, this is the derivatives market. I just lost power in my internet. I don't know how many, it's just the lightning you guys can hear, but there's been lightning for the last, really a lot of lightning. But anyways, there was this correction in 2019, which became, what we're dealing with now. And they really can't come out and tell you the truth. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of leadership, that they provided for, our parents and our grandparents, and to some extent us up to this point, a lifestyle that was like a family going into severe debt and going to Disney World, having no income, having no, a positive economic situation, no plan for the future, and not preparing the next generation and future generations. In fact, future generations are screwed over. And so it's very auspicious, the reign and the heartfulness system, that there is, whenever there's these big bandaras, these birthday celebrations, it rains, and that's supposed to It's a material version of divine grace descending down into the gathering. And so we've lost electricity. I don't know what's happening here. But we don't have internet right now. I guess it's back up and running. But anyways, going back to this essential point, they haven't done a good job of preparing people of the future, right? And now the system is collapsing, and they need to prepare people for that collapse, right? They need to, prepare all of us for changes going on, but they want control. The people who control the system, and this isn't really about them because they are, they've been given leadership positions or they've seized it or whatever, but it's part of a divine plan. It's the Kali Yuga. I've talked about this before. But their, leadership version is to do what's best for them, what they consider what is best for them and for the beastly masters, the system, and the, demonic energy and powers that they serve, right? And so they are not telling people what they need to hear and preparing people for what needs to happen. Like saying it's okay not to be okay. This idea that this, has been pushed out there by the powers that be, celebrating the broken people and saying all these broken people should be some way, catered to and, all the things that aren't available when the system collapses, right? Like you might have a situation where a parent dies, a mom dies or a dad dies, and the oldest child no longer can be a child. Like the oldest, whoever, it'd be 12 years old, could be, 10 years old. All of a sudden, they have to take a leadership role in the family because the family needs them to do that. Or, there's single families, single moms out there, and the kids end up having to, because they're oftentimes in desperate circumstances. They only have one parent, and on top of that, they're in poverty. On top of that, they have all these difficulties and issues, and the kids have to grow up quicker. Like they have to take responsibility. They have to do things that they have to function on an adult level. It's not desirable. It's not something that you would say you'd wish upon a kid, that they would have to neglect their childhood and not develop fully as a child because your world has changed and responsibilities are there that that you have to meet. That just to survive, you can't be a kid anymore. And you have these stages in your life. And this is also what I'm talking about here. When you're a young child, you're a toddler, you're just learning about the world. You're observing, you're learning about how to work your body, you're learning how to, use language, walk and talk and all these. These are milestones, right? I mean, think about how important some of the things that you did when you were 2 years old, these accomplishments, learning how to talk, learning how to understand language. Like think about how big that is on a moment-to-moment basis. How much you're using language and you're communicating with people in the world. Like right now, you're listening to this and I'm talking, right? And so my learning to talk and your learning to listen is essential to this whole thing that's happening right now. I mean, every moment. And then walking, like how important walking is, and, using your hands and doing all these things, writing and, typing on your keyboard, using your thumbs on your phone or whatever it is, all these skills that were based in your, first couple of years on this, on this planet. And so when there's abuse in a family and when there's a kid can't focus just on their, because kids just need to dump toys on the ground and play with them and figure out what to do. It's playing becomes, development. They're playing their curiosity and they're learning about the world and observing. And so they just need to focus on that. But when there's crises going on and their consciousness needs to raise up to higher levels because of, abusive situation or they're in some war-torn country or whatever, then they can't spend 100% of their time developing their, whatever it is, right? And then that, as they become older as kids, they're learning more about the social aspects of society and they're having, they're playing and play acting and, having imagination games with their friends and, these things, and they're developing an internal world. Like this is why I talk about the heartfulness meditation. You have an internal world. You have your psyche, what's inside of you, the kind of person you are, the kind of character qualities you have. And you have stories and myths, and you get religious teaching and things, and you begin to have this internal persona that's created. And again, if you were forced to become an adult and survive and focus on like food and all these things, you're instead of just food just appearing when your mom or your dad makes you a meal, or you go to whatever it is, right? But now you start to have to be responsible. Then you're not developing all these things, because a lot of your energy is going into survival. And then when you turn into your 20s and your late teens, now you're learning to be successful in the world. You're getting a career, you're finding a significant other to have kids with, all these things, right? And up until these three stages of life, and again, there's more, smaller stages in there, but with all these stages, like one of the stages is individuation, where a child breaks free from their family and then goes out on their own. And so there's these, milestones. But up into that point, it's all about developing potential. But then you get into your late 30s, 40s, and certainly 50s, where I am. It's not about your future anymore, right? Like you're now planning, the time until you die, like you're thinking about retirement, you're thinking about getting, stopping your job, and you are, in terms of yourself, all right, how am I going to survive? I'm going to retire, I'm going to stop doing my work, and then, what are you going to do with your time, whatever it might be? People have their various, well, I want to go retire to this area, play golf, and do whatever, right? And what are you going to do with your time until you die? But then there's this other part, which is, what are you leaving behind for other people? Like, what are you able to teach and prepare the younger generations? Because, you might be a CEO of a company or a leader of a company, or, you're a grandparent, your kids you now have adult kids, or, in the community, you might be a, whatever it is, politician, or even like, president or something. And a good leader is now, all right, what are we going to leave behind for the next generation? It isn't about my future. Like my future, it's then my life is winding down. But what about the future of the next generation? And that's true leadership, right? So you're no longer as much focused about your greatness or what you're going to do or your achievement or your success. You're about setting up the next generation and preparing them for the world the way it's going to be, honestly. And our, leadership is failing in that. Our leadership, which is, their time is over. It's the end of the yuga. They're going to be stripped of their power. This, consciousness, this egregore of selfishness and, this debt-based economy people, whatever it is, they're going to be stripped of their power. Their power is, being taken away. Their reign is over. Their rule is over. And so preparing the next generation, realizing, all right, they took a lot out of this. They got a lot of wealth and resources and privileges and things. We've had a good run, but it's over. The system's collapsing. And they need to know, the people we're in charge of and their children and grandchildren need to be prepared, because this promise that we gave them, that if you leave your farm skills behind, you leave all these things behind, your family, your relationship with God, that our system will always be there for you and always take care of you, was a lie. And so this lie is now, this debt, right? This, I don't know what you want to call it, this false promise is coming back around, right? They have to pay up. They have to pay up on their lie. They have to, they have to take responsibility. And again, it wasn't them. It was earlier versions of this, whatever you want to call this leadership. But they're not preparing people at all. They're doing just the opposite. They're dividing everybody. And that's, another thing that I haven't talked about before in a way that I'm going to talk about it here and come back to that part. So they're dividing everybody. But also they're celebrating weakness. They're putting this stuff out there, right? Like, it's okay not to be okay, and celebrating brokenness. Okay, it's okay to be broken. Well, it's not okay to be broken, because you're going to have to overfunction. You're going to have to compensate. You're going to have to, go against everything that you've been trained to do as a human being, and reach back and go into the past and grab the, ancestry of being an agrarian person, of growing food and, you're going to have to reach up and connect to God. You have to go inward and, have this, deepening of your relationship with God, right? The heartfulness meditation, connecting to God on a deeper level. All these things are going to happen, and it's not what you desire. It's not what you think you're entitled to. It's not what you've been promised. You can't wallow away in your brokenness and explore your brokenness and, all your entitlements and all your weaknesses. Like, that's over with. You got to have to step up, right? You're going to have to rise up to a higher level of existence, because the system you're 100% dependent on and has screwed you over and has not prepared you in any possible way for what you're about to face is collapsing, and you need to get to it, right? I got a couple of comments. I might as well put those in here that were just, pertain to this. The weakness of people. I had somebody who wrote unsubscribed, which happens all the time, which I think it was a video I was talking about Jojo Magoo, but I also was making fun of Trump and Trumpers. And so I think it was the second part. They didn't specify, and I don't care, right? Okay, good luck. But the other person wrote this. Now, I made a video, how and where to get heartfulness books. And so this was for people who are doing the heartfulness system, and they have asked me where they can get literature. And I actually have to do a little bit of a follow-up on that. But this person wrote Sahaj Marg or Heartfulness Meditation. So they went and found, I don't know, the official website, or I don't know what they did. This is a statement about heartfulness from somewhere. And so it says Sahaj Marg or Heartfulness Meditation is a set of meditative practices first developed at the turn of the 20th century and formalized into the teaching through Sri Ramchandra Mission in 1945. It's a form of Raja Yogic meditation system, use of pranahuti or yogic transmission, and the cleaning of impressions called samskaras are claimed to be unique to this method. And then the person wrote, nope, with 3 explanation points, which I, got a chuckle out of, because, I've been through this, and I talked about this, a personal, more autobiographical video, I don't know what it's called, but I talked about some of my, going through graduate school and some of the other things that I had something that I thought was good and to offer to other people. And a big part of it is the heartfulness meditation, but it also is this truth or information, the videos, and, what I put in the videos here. And, I've noticed over the years when I used to talk to people personally about this, that there would be a wall that would go up. Now, this could be talking to, anybody, young people that I work with when I was a counselor, sometimes with my own kids, sometimes with, people I knew, and it could be about heartfulness. It could be about information that I was presenting to people. And, of course, like, again, doing this as a counselor, and I had, kids who were wards of the court, right? Sex offenders who were a part of the legal system. They had parole officers and people controlling their lives, and they had to complete the treatment program to regain their freedom, right? To get out of the treatment center, which they didn't want to be. It's like a prison where they're in a psychological prison with other sex offenders. It's a place they don't want to be. None of them want to be there. And when I, had my initial meetings with them, I'd say, this is where you are. This is what you got to do. You want to get out of here? This is the psychological work you're supposed to do. And oftentimes this wall would go up. And like I said, I've experienced this in so many different ways. I'm sure it happens when you're listening. Some people are listening to the videos and they like what I have to say and they're connecting with me. And then I say something and it triggers a defense mechanism. And it's like a wall is between you. Like there's just, the person has thrown up a wall and they're overwhelmed or they're butthurt or they're whatever. And they're no longer receiving what you're saying, even though what you're saying to them could be for their essential good. Many of you have experienced this with your relatives and talking about these things, and that people will throw up a wall. And, when they do that, it's just no longer my problem. It's not my problem to figure out how to take down the wall, to get around the wall, to make them feel more comfortable. I mean, I just, especially this late in the game. like my thought about it is, this is an act of survival. This is an act of, whether you're going to be a part of the future, certainly here on this planet, but on a spiritual level, more importantly, that you're making a decision. Your ego's making a decision that your soul, has to abide by. You're screwing your soul over by not being able to rise up to what you need to hear and what you need to do and accept the changes that you have to undergo. You want to be told what you want to hear. That's why you like Trump. That's why you like, Q, or all this hopium and false hope was given to you that this system could be fixed, and it's all the controller's fault. It's all the elite. It's all the, a bunch of bad apples. But we've all created this mess, right? We all signed off on it. We all participated on it. And now it's collapsing. It's our responsibility to leave something behind for the next generation and help them. And spiritually is like the biggest part. Like everyone, needs to connect to God just in some level, on a deeper level, even if it's just, a small effort on your part. I mean, this is the heartfulness system, so that your soul on a future existence can, move forward with this. And also young people who are, around have the, you're building a field of energy for them. Like every time there's a heartfulness gathering and, more and more people meditate and, connect with the transmission and are receiving the information and the energy that comes from the transmission, that it grows, the consciousness, the group consciousness grows, and the energy field grows, the love energy, the divine energy, and it, produces a more likelihood that the kids of tomorrow will become saints, not only your soul in a future life, but also, the kids that are around now, and that there's more divine energy to, combat the crazy materialistic stuff that's going on with our system. And so it's inherent for each person to move a little bit in the right direction, or a lot if they can, to help the future generation and lead them, create a pathway for them in the future. There's a huge choice point that's happening right now because we've gone completely down the wrong path, and then there's going to be consequences for it. To neglect our spiritual side, to go against the divine laws and all the things that we've done collectively as a society, following the controllers, the Pied Piper, leading us off a cliff. And as we, sink down into the abyss, right, as this civilization collapses and people are broken and their brokenness is being celebrated, it's okay to not be okay. And, I don't have to rise up to something higher. I can just, go into my own brokenness and my psychological despair and just celebrate that, like how great it is to be broken and I deserve, and, victim consciousness and poor me and I deserve this and entitlement and all these weaknesses that have been created by our society that we've passed on to our kids, and our, each generation, they become weaker and weaker. And we've just, passed that on to our future versions of ourselves. And so the weakness is being celebrated when you need to be strong, when you got to reach up and become more than what you are. It's like when you first leave your parents' house and you become, a responsible adult. And there's all these things that are inside of you that haven't been activated, haven't been used. They're dormant because your parents do it for you or society does it for you. But then all of a sudden you need to do it. Like you need to step up. You need to grow food. You need to, have a community. You need to have a positive relationship with, your significant other. You need to come together as a team to do positive work. You can't be dwelling on the negatives and the complaints and, what about me and poor me and this name, me, right? This, like those are things of the past, right? You got to get over whatever you feel inside, the negativity, the unhappiness, the depression, the fear, all the things that you're going to feel when stuff collapses. You got to step up and survive, right? You have to become more than what you were prepared to become, more than you thought you had to be, right? And this, the most important part of that is on a spiritual level, you have to reach up and connect to God in your soul and start getting instruction and making decisions with God and, your soul's path in mind. Like making decisions, joint decisions where you're asking God and God's showing you what you need to do and what you need to become and the path that you're on, and helping you, make the right decision over and over again, because you no longer have the margin of error that you used to, where you could go off and fuck off and make a lot of bad decisions and do the wrong thing, and and someday later, all right, I'll come back to it, because the system encouraged you to do the wrong thing. But now there's no choice. Like, you have to go and do the right thing. You have to be successful in terms of your spiritual path and your soul and all these things. The reason you came down, you have to reestablish connection with the divinity within you and your divine purpose. And the other piece to this is the division. So the controllers as leaders, and again, I'm not making it about them, because it's all about what we're going to do, and this is part of a divine plan. It's a part of our soul's journey, and this is what we've been left with. This is, this is right. This is just. This is what we have to deal with, all of us, collectively. And the people who control the system, their system is crumbling, and they're doing what they always do, is take care of themselves and act selfishly and go against the will of God. That's what they're, in some ways, this was part of a plan, so they are adhering to the will of God. But now that their system is collapsing, they need to prepare people and be honest with them about what's going to happen, and not celebrate their weaknesses and give them more disinformation and make them more and more dependent on the system, the beast, and this, obscurantism, right? So this, this lying to them and disinformation. And the other piece is division. You see how much anger and hatred is happening on a daily basis, which is like a venom that's rising up in each individual and people across, the internet, but also, in any kind of social media type of situation, but in real life as well, where people just have this venom that they want to spit at other people, blame them, whatever based in demographics or whatever it is. And that is, rising. They're cultivating that, right? They're poisoning the internal worlds of, each group. Like people will say, well, I don't understand how somebody could believe Joe Biden is a good president when you see all the screw-ups and all the things that we see and the Republicans see about Joe Biden. But the Democrats don't get to see those things. They don't want to see them. If you as a truther, or you as a Republican go to your liberal and Democrat friends or relatives and try to send them links, they won't watch them. They're closed to it. And they won't see it. Even if they watch it, they won't see it. They don't see Joe Biden as being a doddering old fool. And they'll just say, oh, what, you think Trump is better? Just like with the Trumpers. Like the Trumpers won't see how Trump is a flim-flam man and the things that Trump has done. They won't see it, or the Cubies, or every group, right? People will throw up that wall I talk about, and they don't get access to the same narratives and information. They're in a different tract. There's a different track of, information. They're watching different sources of information. Your kids are watching different things. And they look at you. They've been told your parents are, crazy, conspiracy theorists, or whatever it is. And their kids are, walking around doing different things. The parents are not wearing masks. The kids are. Like, they have a totally different version of reality, what's going on inside of them. And everybody's been told that the other group is crazy and bad for them. And they're poisoned against coming together and trying to understand other points of view and what other people believe. And this is the old divide and conquer, which has been used over and over again by the controllers. The British did it, quite well when they had their, reign of terror, when the sun never set on the British Empire, which is still a little bit true, which is not as true as it was, but it's still true. And when the British were, Gandhi'd and they were forced to leave India, the British kept on saying over and over again, as soon as we leave, the Hindus and the Muslims will be at each other's throats. It'll be, a bloodbath. And that was their excuse for trying to hang on to power there and exploit their colonial hold, because they had exacerbated the tensions between the Muslims and the Hindus that were doing, fine before the British were there. Once the British were there, they created this divide and conquer, which was, in this case, between the Muslims and the Hindus. And then when the British left, yeah, it was a bloodbath. And the British said, see, we were there keeping the peace. But they're the ones who created the division. And now, there's Pakistan and India. It used to be all India. Now there's two countries that have been separated by religious differences that were exacerbated by the colonial masters of the British government, the British, royal rule. And this has been done over and over again across the globe, where they end up being peacekeepers between divisions that they create. This is, what all governments do now. I mean, almost, I don't know. What I assume is all the big governments, certainly, all the power brokers. It's a way that they control through division and through, it could be a war with another country, but now it's internalized divisions. But they've drawn up the battle lines. They've drawn up, which side you're going to be on, and you're having to choose sides and all these things. And things are so bad and heated right now in terms of the schism, in terms of the division, there's a year of the schism, that as soon as something real happens, wait till something like where, people are fighting over the last batch of Twinkies or, Chicken McNuggets in Walmart or with processed foods. So I just got a call from my brother, and there was something going on for me and my family today that was, a big movement, something moving in the right direction. This was all happening during the rainstorm. Then my brother called, and he's having sort of a breakthrough with something he was going through that I've been aware of. And there's these moments, I don't know how to describe them, where something shifts, where unresolved things or something that has been hanging over your head for a while, or, something's either going to go one way or another. And then all of a sudden, all these things at the same day, there's a shift in them and they go one way or another and there's some resolution. And they're just these special times where there's some clarity and God has ruled or whatever, however you want to look at it. And you have these, moments where there's epiphanies and, just things open up and there's a shift in whatever's going on. There's some definitive movement or moment. And it might be an internal shift where you're just oh, I know what I have to do. You've been, worried about something, you've been hemming and hawing, and all of a sudden you're oh, I know exactly what I have to do. You wake up and you're boom, there's this moment of clarity. And, today's one of those days. So back to the originally scheduled program. So you have people who have been divided, who have been, are angry and hateful towards other groups. And next thing you know, they're fighting over, Pop-Tarts at Walmart or processed food or whatever it is. And now the anger explodes, right? At the same time where they've exacerbated the anger and hatred and division in this country, they've also hammering the police, hammering law enforcement, disempowering law enforcement right at a time where things are about to explode, right? And so if people are this angry and this, triggered, and things are still going pretty well for them in terms of, they still have internet, you still have electricity, you still can drive your car, people still have some money, disposable income, and there's food and things available. What happens when one or all of those things is no longer consistent or disappears altogether? And you have people who are triggered and angry and are feeling like a victim. When you have a crisis, when you're about to go into a crisis, you don't want to be divided. You don't want to be fighting with your spouse and then have a crisis happen. I mean, sometimes it can pull people together, but usually it just divides you even more. The stress of it. You're already angry. You're already blaming the other person for, all the things that are going wrong. And then something big happens and you're and you're responsible for this too, right? Even if it has nothing to do with them. And so when America comes down, people are going to blame the left, or they're going to blame the right, or they're going to blame the truthers or the sheeple or whoever it is. You already have the people that you think are to blame, and they're going to blame you. I mean, that's, how this thing's being set up. And so all the energy that it would take to, adjust and accept your situation, understand it's coming from God and it's happened, and blame just doesn't do anything good for anybody. You got to put that energy into adapting to what's happening, isn't going to go in that direction. And that's what the controllers are setting up, right? I mean, the least that they could do for their participation and their, financial, the financial benefits and lifestyle that generations of them have reaped out of this, demonic system, is to at least make the transition better and easier, which they're clearly not doing. They just want to, somehow come up with a way that they can control everything on the other side of the collapse, and it's not going to happen. But, that's what they're focused on, themselves, their power and their privileges and all these other things. And going back to this idea of getting rid of the police, right? Having a minimal authority figures in there where everyone's at their throats, right? When things are breaking down. This is what happened in India when the British withdrew, when you have, these exacerbated demographic divisions between groups of people, and then you withdraw the peacekeepers, the people who are, the law enforcement or whatever it is, the people will just go at each other. I mean, this is what always happens. Another example, I've been talking about, the NBA basketball and how there's so much disrespect to the game where players are gaming the rules and cheating and working the officials. The officials are the police, the authority figures. And many of these NBA players are saying they are social justice warriors. They want to be a part of a movement in social justice, and the way that they're treating the authority figures and the rules and the laws, exploiting the rules and the laws, in terms of the basketball game. You see it, and it's just wrecking the entertainment value of the NBA. Like, it's just a bunch of whiners. You see this in soccer where some guy gets, fouled or whatever, they, penalty, somebody does something to them, and they fall on the ground like they just are bleeding to death, right? And they, like they've been somehow, permanently injured to draw attention to it. And now in the NBA, they go over to the monitors and these guys, exaggerate and act and pretend that something happened to them that didn't. And, if I didn't have fast forward, I wouldn't, I mean, it's just, ridiculous stuff, right? It just, makes the games go longer, and it's horrible. But if you take the officials away, because most basketball that's played around the world is pickup basketball, street ball, park ball, stuff that I played for years when I was younger. And it's based in an honor system where people call their own fouls. Now when the basketball goes out of bounds, you watch both teams point in their direction, even the guy who knows the ball went off of him and he lies about it. But in a pickup game of basketball, a game without referees, there has to be an honor system. And the way that used to work, there was a couple of things. Now, if there was a dispute, you would have the two guys who were disputing, like the ball could have went off of either one of them, and they both see it in a different way. They would do these things where you throw down either two fingers or one fingers. One would call odds, the other would call evens, and whoever won got the ball. And it just, made the game move on, right? The other thing is if somebody got fouled and it was controversial, the person would say, respect the call. Now, I don't know if that still exists. It probably does, at least in some, parks or whatever it was. But that meant if there was going to be a dispute about the call, then the whole game would be wrecked. So some guys would, drive to the basket, say, and they would get hit, right? They would get fouled. Or sometimes they would just miss, and they would call foul, right? Ball. There was different ways of calling it. The person would say foul, or they said ball, which meant they got fouled. And if the other team was like, you didn't get fouled, right? The guy would say, respect the call. But then the other team would go down the other end and someone would miss and they'd call ball, right? They would call foul, even though they didn't get fouled. And it could wreck the game. I've seen games be wrecked by people cheating and, trying to manipulate the rules. Sometimes guys come down and they just want to fight somebody or argue with somebody. There's lots of arguments and things on the basketball court. But you have to work it out or the game sucks, right? People have to have, some level of honesty and integrity or the game is just going to be ruined and you're going to wreck it for everybody. And sometimes people just do that. They come down and they cheat and they lie and they manipulate. I've given examples of this. There was a guy I was playing with the team, the college basketball team at my second attempt at college. And most of the people playing were members of the team. And there was a guy, he used to be a former Harlem Globetrotter, and he was an assistant coach, and he was new. And he was on my team, and he was just, making foul calls that weren't, didn't happen. Like one time the other team had a breakaway where the guy was, miles ahead of everybody, was going to lay the ball in. Like there was no dispute. There should be no dispute. And before the guy laid the ball in, and there was no one around him, he yelled foul. This guy did. It was the other team. And there was like, what? And what are you talking about? And he was just like wrecking the game. And our team won, which meant we got to stay on the court, but it just sucked. Like, it wasn't, fun playing. The guy was just manipulating the outcome. He's an older guy, cheating, and he pissed everybody off. He's supposed to be a coach, right? He's supposed to be establishing rapport with the kids he was coaching, and he wasn't doing it. And so, I've been through this in terms of an honor system. But you don't necessarily need referees. You don't need police. But you have to rise up and take responsibility and keep the peace yourself. And that's a situation that could happen here, right? When the collapse of the system happens, everyone could rise up to a higher level and say, all right, we need to be in community. We have to make sure that everyone gets fed. We have to contribute. Everyone's got to serve other people. We got to make sure everyone gets taken care of. The strong people have to, pull the weak people up. We have to, do this on our own. We can't depend on the government anymore. We can't depend on law enforcement and, the army and all these things. I mean, it'll be actually the opposite. We got to come together as a community. We have to serve God. We have to connect on a higher level. We have to be willing to sacrifice and, get pumped up about it and, want to come together in a unified sort of, organizational way, a village-based sort of family farm, a tribe, and that's an outcome that could happen. We're not going to, be prejudiced against other people based on, superficial demographics. We're all going to come together and survive this thing and look out for each other and, and serve other people for God and bring God into this and connect to God, the heartfulness meditation, these things. That's one way it could happen. That's not the way it's probably going to happen because of the way it's being set up and how people are about it. Like going into something, you want to be prepared for it in every possible way, emotionally, and, just be ready for it. But the way that things are going now, it's just going to be, Mad Max apocalyptic, smackdown where everyone's just going to go ballistic and go apeshit, right? And, that's the way it's lining up, but it doesn't have to go that way. And, partially it's the fault of our leadership, but also it's our fault. It's, the way that we're going about it. And people would rather be blaming and angry than try to work on a solution. They just want to cheat their way to get whatever they can get out of the thing. Respect the call. It's our motto. Definitely reporting for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Only spirituality will save this world. Everybody have a blessed day and be grateful.